Hey everyone, it's great to be here today. My name's Chris Bray. I'm the managing partner of Heidrick and Struggles Global Technology and Services Practice for Europe and Africa. I've been in executive search now for coming up to 17 years, and I've been with Heidrick for over 11. I lead our business in Europe, but I personally have spent all of my time in search helping enterprise software companies build out and scale their go to market and senior executive positions. And I'm delighted to be joined here today by one of the most preeminent leaders in the industry globally. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Chris. Living in Europe now for 11 years, UK, Europe. You can tell American by accent, British and European by time now. No, so yeah, I'm now doing non-executive director roles, executive coaching, but I was 10 years at Salesforce, 9 of them in Europe. Last role was running EMEA, and then I was 2 years at Google Cloud running EMEA for them as well.
And today we're here to talk about an incredibly important and hot topic globally and specifically in the tech industry. And I've had the privilege to work with and alongside Chris over the last few years. And Chris has built some phenomenal, diverse teams, and I just felt that he would have such a incredible and unique insight. And Chris, I'd love to just start off the discussion by maybe asking you why you think this topic is so important and top of mind for so many organizations around the world today.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Chris. I think for me it's twofold. And I think I was lucky enough to learn early in my career as a leader the power of a diverse team and all kinds of diversity. Cross nationality. About 20 years ago, I had my first role, or 20 more than 22, 23 years ago now, my first role outside the U.S. I was working in Latin America, and just seeing the power of people with diverse backgrounds and how the collective thinking is much better when you have diversity. So that was probably an early pillar for me. And then obviously, I think that science has pervaded the industry, but having diverse teams is also the right thing to do, and hiring diversity. So it's really gotten momentum, from both of those things. But it's the thing our industry wants and needs to do now. I think leaders that come from a place of understanding the power of it and not just somebody's telling me to do it. I think that gives you an added advantage at trying to build diverse teams.
Right. No, I agree, Chris. And I think another really interesting lens on it is, frankly, it's just really commercially smart as well, right? I mean, if we think about just the incredible digital transformation that companies have gone on during the pandemic, it's been this huge wave of digital transformation, and there's nowhere more apparent than in the BTC sector, right? I mean, if you're a retailer, for example,
Exactly.
and if you don't have an e-commerce storefront, you basically didn't have a business for like most of the last 2 years. And
Yeah.
and I remember, I think you and I at Salesforce were actually chatting about this a few years ago, which was just the persona of buyers online. And whilst I was just doing some research on this, I just looked at the current stats. So in 2020, 87% of online purchases in the UK were transacted by females. And I think if you're a B2C company who's thinking through how you're going to build, design, sell, market your e-commerce stores, and if that's not an incredibly diverse team, you're just not representing your customer base. You're just not going to do it very well, right? I mean,
No, look, you're absolutely right. I mean, we used to have that conversation about showing up to the customer, in a way that looks empathetic, and like we represent what they look like, both from a staff perspective, if they've done a good job building out a diverse team, but like you said, what about their customers? So I think the great news is that the days are over of sort of 5 or 6 people showing up to call on a customer, and it's 5 middle-aged white males, or at least I'd like to think that day's over, because you should be organ rejected by your customer. And so I always think about look and act and live the diversity that your customers do and that they experience in their customer base, but also in your communities. You want your team and your organization to also represent what the community looks like. Lofty goals, and they're difficult because obviously we're dealing with pools of addressable market, and that's not always where we'd like it to be. So you have to be pretty creative to realize goals like that.
I completely agree. And Chris, you kind of touched on it there around, hopefully the days have gone and of showing up to meetings with a completely non-diverse group. And, a big part of how you go about achieving that is through, hiring and building diverse teams, right? And that has been, if we think about the technology industry, wind the clock back 5 to 10 years in both sales and engineering roles, it has been traditionally an incredibly white male dominated industry. What tips and how would you have, like what approaches have you taken to building the incredible diverse teams that you've assembled in your career?
Education would be one. Intentionality is another. And when I say education, it's making sure that people understand why they're doing it, and not just because it comes from very well intentioned top of the company or an initiative, or there's people that work in DEI in your company, and your CHRO is helping guide and push that, but educate them on why it actually makes their teams better, why they'll show up better and execute better with customers and empathize better and how to solve customer problems. So I think, and there's obviously very formal ways you can do that and should do that. But it's also just like continuing to demonstrate, when you see great examples of diversity leading to really good outcomes or really good thinking or really good creativity, to highlight that, and just sort of take the organization on that journey. And then I think the comment I made on intentionality is just, you can't just stand up on a podium here and there and say it's important and then go away and execute the business. You have to be pretty intentional about, we want to have a more diverse senior leadership team. And a lot of people will know some of the basics that you need to start putting in place. Things like, we're always going to end up with, our final three having diversity in that pool. And while it may slow us down sometimes or sometimes not, it's going to increase the chances that if we have three really great candidates at the end of every search, and there's diversity in that pool, our probability of hiring diversity is obviously going to go up. So a whole bunch of things like that, but just being really intentional. And the other one I would say is lots of people focus on trying to figure it out at the top. But I would say some of the most interesting things that I've seen in my career were addressing the base of the organization, the individual contributor roles. It's actually easier to do. And while it doesn't address, we have a diversity problem in our leadership in the short term, it actually really can set you up in the mid and long term to have, diverse succession, diverse talent building up throughout the organization. So we had before Salesforce was at a size that you would have thought about them having a graduate program. We birthed a program like that, and the people that led the charge, it was amazing because clearly one of the things that they believed was in 5, 7, 8 years, if we do this, hire more diverse talent, is we could probably get to 40, 50% based on the pools that we would have access to. Imagine the leaders that'll be coming through, but they were 4, 5, 7, 8 years out in the thinking. And when an organization starts to address that bottom, I guarantee you in the mid and long term, those issues around imbalance at the top, they go away. So I think it's, being intentional across the organization at all levels on, if you're going to make that change, don't just make it for aesthetics, make it for genuine lasting impact.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Chris. And that word intentionality that you mentioned really hit home with me. Just when I've been thinking about the clients that we've worked with, and we've been fortunate. We've had a huge amount of success of helping clients recruit some of the most prominent, diverse leaders in the tech industry, both here and my colleagues in North America as well. And it's something that always comes up all the time, and rightfully so. Clients challenge us on it, and we challenge clients on it. But generally speaking, there's two ways that clients think about it. And the first way is it is kind of almost kind of hoping to get lucky by recruiting senior females. Clients bring it up at the start and say, look, we'd love a diverse slate, we'd love to have a diverse candidate. And then we kind of jump into, okay, well, let's talk through, what do you actually want in this person? And when a client starts really over indexing on just pure experience, at a very senior level in tech, to my point around 5-10 years ago, there isn't the level of senior female technology leaders. This is not the volume that there is of the male counterparts, right? So as soon as you start layering in huge amounts of experience as being an absolute key requisite, and you kind of start narrowing that whole candidate universe down, especially in what is the hottest technology market and frankly jobs market in history, it's hard to go find any candidates right now who fit every single criteria. And if you start layering in diversity into that, you're really essentially saying, like, let's just go get lucky, guys, right? And now, fortunately, we've got lucky a lot, right? And we have helped hire, a number of really prominent, I'm proud to say, female tech leaders, just through really being lucky, and knowing where they are and when they want to move, and having that knowledge to go get them. But honestly, I think the clients that I've seen genuinely move the needle with diversity over the last 3 to 5 years have that intentionality, Chris, that you talk about. And the way they do that is number one is they're not trying to solve for experience, first of all. Like, they're not saying, right, they have to have done these 15 things because these are the 15 things that we're going to do over the next 3 years. The first thing they would do is say, right, we're going to solve from this hire with leadership, executive gravitas, intellect, drive, the ability to manage a large millennial workforce. All of these skill sets are all super important, but we're going to get creative on experience, right? We're going to go and think about other industry verticals. Sometimes maybe if you're in infrastructure software, maybe it's applications, maybe it's the other way around, maybe it's hardware, maybe it's telecommunications, maybe it's B2B technology. And there's different ways to trade that off. And a lot of that depends on who's got a similar business model to what the role is you're trying to fix, right? But you essentially go, how do we open up the aperture, but without compromising on all of those key soft skills, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, you're preaching to the converted, right? I think you and I did some really good work, and in the last years, but I think we definitely made some decisions that to create diverse teams, we're going to need to sort of not write, because I think you can write it, like you said. I'll say it more directly. You can actually write a spec that forces you down the path of having no diversity on your team.
Correct.
Or having 15 or 20%, because that's probably about where the addressable market is, except to your point, that's going to be even more competitive. So I think by widening the aperture, by saying, look, potential, transferable skills, what else, where else, and just sort of really challenging that. I actually learned that that was a blocker, I think, previously, not just in hiring diversity, but probably in hiring talent in general. And I think the widening of the aperture, diverse or not, really let us, in my last two companies, bring in talent that I might not have hired, 5, 7, 10 years ago. Um, and they're fantastic, with more upside, because we didn't limit ourselves with some of the historical constraints that we might have.
I completely agree. And just thinking through a couple of tips that I've seen clients deploy incredibly effectively around how to go land that talent. Number one is actually, okay, so you're going to bring someone in from a different sector. You can't judge them in the first quarter on what they're doing, right? And we both know that software companies have a very, in particular tech companies have a very short term horizon on what good performance looks like. And I've seen there's one particular technology company with several very prominent senior hires. They will intentionally put them in a different role to the one they've been hired to do, which is essential for a period of 3 to 6 months, and surround them with great coaches, mentors, and let them learn the business, right? And give them that runway to actually figure out what's going on, right? And they're almost shadowing, yeah. And it's been incredibly effective for them, and that particular company, in my mind, has probably moved the needle more than anyone else has in tech on diversity. And one thing that really strikes me and this probably fits into the bucket of some of the clients that talk that kind of want to get lucky rather than have that intentionality. You Female candidates in particular know that they have a huge amount of options in this market. And the number one option is staying where they are, right? And they're normally pretty well paid, and they certainly are getting much better paid now than they were 3 or 4 years ago, right? Companies are not letting senior diverse leaders leave. And if they're talking to you, they're talking to 3, 4, 5, 6 other companies as well. And a big part of their decision making process, and I hear female candidates in particular ask me about this, is, okay, talk to me about other strong female role models and executives in the company. Who has been successful in that environment? Who am I going to meet during the process? And it needs to be, if I'm a commercial person, I want to meet at least another senior commercial peer, right? So, companies who haven't addressed this already, and if you're sat there with a commercial team that is all male, you're in a tricky spot now to move that needle, because they know that they have a lot of options, and if you show up with an interview panel of all white males, they're probably not going to join, right? Because they have so many options.
Couldn't agree more with everything you said. As you started to talk about that, I thought, I think I know where he's going, because it's such a the chicken or egg. And I love your comment about, like, companies that think they're going to get lucky. If you were going to get lucky 5 years ago or 3 years ago, you're not going to get lucky anymore. And I would even say really good, diverse leaders, they're figuring out in the first conversation or two, are you interested in them as a leader? That's the first thing they care about.
Correct.
If you're interested in them as a leader, and they happen to be a diverse leader, then where is that in your agenda? And is it window dressing, or is it genuinely that? And I'll go back to one of the things I said at the beginning. Is it like that people senior in that company believe that diverse teams get better outcomes, because that's what great leaders want to be part of, diverse or not. They're not necessarily, they don't just want to come to help someone fix a diversity issue. That's what some companies want to do.
I agree, Chris. And actually, one really interesting trend that I've seen raised by a couple of male candidates over the past really kind of couple of months, I had a couple of people ask me and respond positively to essentially saying, like, if they're going to move, they will only male candidates, they will only move to work for a female leader, right? They want to have that experience. They want to be in a company that has, a female at the level above, and they want to know that they're in that kind of environment, which is super interesting because 2 years ago that surely would not have happened. So it's
I mean, that's cool. That's cool. That kind of goes back to the comment I said about education. That means all the education that all the companies are doing is actually working, and society evolving is working. You know, and this is not to say like, hey, look at me, but just like thinking about what you're saying there. I'm now looking at. I've joined one board. I'm looking at some more, non-executive opportunities. I go look at the existing footprint of the board. If it's not diverse, one of the conversations I would have as an interviewee is, "What's your plan?" Because I'm just helping. If I'm another non-diverse board member and I look like everyone else on your board, it's not going to perform as well as it could. The business. How does that trickle down to the rest of the organization? And by the way, it's a little embarrassing. It's 2021. Like, let's raise our games collectively.
Yeah, no, I agree, Chris. I agree. And I know you're going to have a big impact on those boards that you come in and raise the bar for sure. Because I think small companies still, especially UK small companies in tech, probably have a lot more work to do than some of the bigger tech companies.
It's harder. It's harder for small companies.
Yeah, it's really hard, right? Because the big companies, they're hoovering up the talent, right? If you look at what's happening in the market, the amount of hiring the hyperscalers are doing, the big tech companies, around them, and also the late stage venture businesses who have just raised so much money over the last 18 to 24 months or so. And the diversity is a huge part of their agenda. If you're a small mid-sized UK tech company, your females are getting picked off by multinational businesses right now. And it's, and I know like the depth of which talent teams systematically go look for female talent now at all levels. And it must be, I'd imagine, really, really hard for some of these smaller players to kind of keep their teams together. So, Chris, we could talk for hours about this, but you maybe kind of coming on to the pandemic for a second. Do you think the return to office will impact how organizations think about diverse talent? And do you think it gives them an opportunity?
I'll start with an assumption, but that might be right and might be wrong. But I think uh, we're never going to go back to exactly the way it was. We may not stay as remote as people think we are now. Maybe there's a hybrid somewhere in the middle, but for sure, it's changed the lens on where my talent needs to be based, which just by the nature of that means my potential pool just got bigger. If my potential pool in general just got bigger, then my potential to hire a more diverse workforce, more diverse leadership team, just went up. And I was thinking about this in the context of some searches that you helped us with, Chris, where I would have, as someone who's led EMEA for 10 years, I would have probably said to you over the years, hey, for an EMEA type role, in either in a segment or an industry, probably prefer that they're in the bigger market. So UK, Germany, France. I think if you and I were kicking off a search like that now, I think we would care a lot less. In fact, I don't think I would care at all. I'd be pretty open to. Actually, I know in this new way of working, they'll figure it out. A good leader is going to figure out, how to get it done. So that just multiplied the market for us if we were kicking off that search today versus how we would have thought about it 3 years ago. I don't know. I'd be interested to know from you, like, are you already noticing that in the searches that you've done in the last, 12, 18 months?
We're definitely noticing that, Chris, and I think both for big and mid-sized tech companies. I mean, obviously, if you're a UK only business, I think you should try and think about this more of like, you don't need to be based in the southeast of England anymore, right? You can kind of be based anywhere. But as you and I both have done a lot of international work, and are very international in what we both do. And when I think about, I completed a head of EMEA search a couple of months back for a business that they had about $350 million of global revenue. Europe was like 20%. They had, I don't know, 90% ish of their employees based in the London office, right? And the chief revenue officer over there, if we talk about intentionality, he really brought that to that search, and he was really committed to hiring a great EMEA diverse leader. And he pushed us hard in that. Look, he was like, I'm really open to thinking about backgrounds, but this is such an important hire for us as well. We do need that good level of experience as well. And so we pushed him on. Well, okay, well let's get creative. And so we pushed him on the location rather than the experience piece. And we actually hired a super experienced female leader based out of Switzerland, and those guys didn't even have an office in Switzerland, right? So they opened up an entity to hire her, and obviously I'm sure they're going to have more people in Switzerland now because they've got an entity there. But their closest office was Germany, and where they only really had a couple of people, right? So I mean, that's a really great example of a small mid-sized tech company really kind of pushing it out there and going, well, how can we get creative about this, and how can we think it through? And I would go further on the big companies, Chris, when you said like major geographies. You've worked in Salesforce and Google, who are pretty open to big geographies. Other big tech companies would just say London before. Like they would say like this person needs to be in London, which kind of really restricts you to expats and Brits, right? And I've seen that go from, for a lot of big tech companies, not just London to Paris and Munich and maybe Amsterdam, to this person can genuinely really be anywhere. We hired a senior tech female executive. She's down in Madrid, and she's moving into an even smaller market as a result of joining. I won't say any more because people will be able to work it out, because it's such a tiny market that she's basically the only senior tech executive in that whole market, right? And there's no way pre-pandemic that a company would have had a senior executive based in that tiny market. So for sure, I think it opens up a huge opportunity. And honestly, I was in the US last week, and what struck me about, I did a kind of whistle stop tour of San Fran, Seattle, and New York, and what struck me about San Fran and Seattle, which are obviously two massive technology hubs, is in tech, workers aren't coming back to the office anytime soon. Like you're going to have this real hybrid model, 2 days a week, 3 days a week max. And if you're not doing that in tech, you're not hiring those people because other people are going to offer that, right? And people want that flexibility. So honestly, in technology, I think there is a huge opportunity to embrace this hybrid landscape we have, to radically change, what your workforce looks like. I was One of the major tech companies was saying they're now looking to build virtual engineering centers in South America, i.e., basically home office based software engineers, because the Bay Area is so expensive, and they now have this huge opportunity.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking, we would have had conversations about leadership searches, multiple hires where we said, quality, diversity, speed all have to be right. It probably will turn out that the pandemic will result in all of that equation getting easier to execute, because people will flex more on location.
And we know with the Great Resignation that the loyalty of workforces has gone down. And I kind of close for the audience with one staggering statistic, and you probably know this, Chris, but nearly 6% of the entire US workforce quit their jobs in August and September alone. I mean, I can't even get my head around that statistic. It's so staggering. But ultimately, if you're not offering that flexibility, and you're not building great diverse teams, you're going to lose your people, right? So it's crazy. Chris, thank you so much for joining me here. So it's been a great discussion.
Thank you, Chris. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, no worries at all. We're going to go and chat for another hour about this offline, but I hope everyone has a great day.